Along with others, Keith and I were also given the opportunity to tell our story personally at conference. A couple of you were there to see us. And share a bit about how we as gay people have experienced life in the United Methodist Church. We've expanded our story just a bit, but would now like to share it with you, our church family.
As a kid growing up in Kansas City, I was extraordinarily lucky. I had loving parents who made their kids their first priority. My dad, who many of you have had the chance to know in the last few years of his life, was the son of a Methodist minister. My mom, she was a Methodist deaconess. Teenage organizer that I was, I'd plan our youth fellowship summer trips, and my parents were always troopers to chaperone our posse, even when other parents just couldn't seem to find the time. By the time I went to college, I wanted to keep that spiritual life vibrant and to maintain this important connection to the church. So I chose my alma mater, Central Methodist University in Missouri. But long before I made it to college, I was deeply aware that I was different. I was equally aware that my difference, being gay, somehow made me unacceptable in the eyes of the church. I dared not utter my thoughts or my feelings to anyone. Several years later, during my first year of medical school, I was torn again by conflicting feelings. Would I have to give up on everything I believed in to finally accept myself? I wasn't sure of the answer to that question, frankly, but what I knew for certain was that I was paying an enormous spiritual and emotional price for hiding my identity. I was hiding from my family, I was hiding from my friends, I was even hiding from myself. For the first time in my life, I decided to seek the advice of my pastor, Dr. Ed Ankeny at Mount Vernon Place United Methodist Church in Baltimore. It was Dr. Ankeny who counseled that I could be myself and still be a beloved child of God. At this profoundly vulnerable junction in my life, I had been brought to this man of God in this very special United Methodist Church. I had been given the blessing of continuing my journey as a Christian and as a United Methodist, as a whole integrated person. What an amazing gift.
My journey to find Christ came much later in life. I was not raised in a church-going family. But in my early 30s, I began to seek a spiritual connection to God and a deeper sense of purpose in my life. I visited several churches in the Los Angeles area, but never found anything that felt quite right. Then came a Sunday afternoon in 1996. I was attending a Thanksgiving brunch hosted by some friends when a late arriving guest, Keith, showed up in a coat and tie along with a change of clothes. Curious, I'd asked him from where he had just come. He replied that he'd been attending services at Hollywood UMC, surprising me a bit because none of my friends went to church. I told him that I'd been looking for a church home and a congregation in which I could feel connected and experience a sense of community. Since I wanted a church home where I would be embraced as a gay man, but I also wanted a church that was as diverse as the city I called home. I wanted a community of faith that included families with children, LGBT people and straight people, and people of different ethnicities. What I found at Hollywood UMC was not only that community, but also a congregation, what I found not only was a community and a wonderful congregation, but also a very special person. Our love for one another was not only allowed, it was encouraged. With Keith by my side, I became active in the congregation, finding spiritual nourishment with God and in this community of faith. I was later baptized by Hollywood UMC's then pastor, Dr. Ed Hansen, in 1997. It was about 8 years ago when we first began spending our weekends here in the desert. In those first couple of years, we'd often lamented about how we missed a regular church home. We'd attended a few churches here and there, but we couldn't find anything that we liked as well, and we really missed Hollywood United Methodist Church very much. We'd go periodically, but we really just couldn't find that right fit.
When my dad and sister moved to the area in 2005, I knew it would be important to connect more deeply with the church once again. As Dad settled into a new life away from his familiar Kansas City, we wanted him to be part of a new church family as well. It was with Dad that we reacquainted ourselves with the United Methodist Church of Palm Springs, and where we found another embracing pastor in Reverend Amanda and a loving community of faith. When we were married just over 2 years ago, after 12 years together, our big day of celebration was deeply enriched by the presence of several of you, representing the great diversity of our church family and sharing in our commitment to each other and before God.
As you hear this and other stories from members of our congregation in the months to come, we hope that this will help you expand the reason and experience with which we, the United Methodist Church of Palm Springs, approach our outreach to the GLBT community. In his widely cited book, Five Practices of Fruitful Congregations, UMC Bishop Robert Schnazzi of Missouri suggests that churches must engage in several key practices if they wish to survive and thrive. One is radical hospitality, and the other is risk-taking, mission, and service. When we think of our Palm Springs community, how can we be more effective in demonstrating our hospitality to all? How can we sharpen our mission and service in this community? As the United Methodist Church, as the United Methodist Church here in Palm Springs, we have a special opportunity to witness to our neighbors throughout the Coachella Valley that the love of Christ is unqualified and unconditional. We do that each time we welcome a newcomer, any newcomer, to worship with us on Sunday morning services. But because of the expectations of many gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people, that churches are likely to be unwelcoming or unsafe places, we must communicate out loud that this is a safe place to set foot, that it is safe to set foot on our grounds. When you expect to be rejected, it takes a powerful message of welcoming to know that it is safe to come inside. This is why we, along with many other members of our church, are urging our congregation to consider declaring itself formally a reconciling congregation. The reconciling movement began about 30 years ago, and today includes several hundred United Methodist congregations, annual conferences, and college ministries. In simple terms, reconciling congregations directly and specifically affirm that they are welcoming to people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. While we imply this in our proclamation, all means all, it makes it absolutely clear that as GLBT people, we are all included. It is a step in our process of radical hospitality and risk-taking mission.
Over the next several months, we'll have the opportunity to hear other members of our church family tell their stories. We'll be able to study with one another, to pray with one another, and to know one another even more deeply. We can embrace the opportunity to genuinely love our neighbors as ourselves. As we look out in this congregation, we see the faces of family. It's a diverse family, and the one that could be easily divided by all the ways in which we could identify that we are different from one another. But our strength as a community of faith and as a family, it doesn't come through our sameness. It comes through our diversity. We must cherish this, and we must foster this, and we must proclaim it. We've often been blessed by your love and kindness, most recently when we were surrounded by your care following Dad's death in July. You are our family, and we invite you to join us in working together toward an even deeper understanding and love for one another. We are honored to be part of your family, and we will be blessed by your passionate participation in this important step in our family life. Let us proudly proclaim that the United Methodist Church of Palm Springs will be a beacon of hope in this community. Let us proclaim to all who will hear it that we are genuinely a people of open hearts